building, they would fire off a picture, for example, of what that building was like 100 years ago. So they were looking at the historical evolution of the place. But one of the nice applications was in archaeology. If I skip one slide forward for a moment, this person, Carl Smith, had developed all these recreations. They're actually Cistercian abbeys. They're like cathedrals, basically. And they're all ruins now, but he did these virtual recreations, and he did this a few years ago as part of a separate project. And you could access these on your desktop. But then he had the interesting idea of saying, well, isn't it much more powerful if you put it on a mobile phone, and the student can go to the building and look at it and see the present building and see a virtual overlay of what it looked like 400, 500, 600 years ago. And he did this, and we tested this out with students. And here we've got students in the field trip, and they're in the Abbey, but they've got these virtual overlays. And one of the things that came through was it created very rich dialogue between the students. They were talking about the building the way it was now, the way it was several hundred years ago. And it wasn't just the virtual reality overlay, it was the richness of the dialogue that led to. And there's just one little final thing I'd like to show, because I like this one. What this is a mobile phone, and you can point it up at the stars at night. And what it does here, oh, you can't see very well, unfortunately, but what it's got an overlay of the constellations. And it's got the labeling this one, which is Pisces. So you can hold this phone up, and you get this virtual overlay which identifies the constellation, gives you the name. Now, this is quite a different type of learning from what we normally do in higher education. What really interested me is it actually returns you to a more natural form of learning. Instead of going in a room where you can't see the stars, looking it up in a book, trying to remember, going out at night, it's there, you can see it immediately. It's almost like having a knowledgeable person who knows about the constellations beside you, telling you. It's like a very old form of embedded learning. So there's huge potential for these devices and how we use them effectively. And the big challenge for us really is really to think creatively. And ultimately it has to come back to teachers. You know, the design should come from teachers. The tools, the resources are there to be used. It's like this room. I mean, there's some powerful, interesting resources, but someone had a design idea and shaped it. And she took a very old idea and actually wove it together to create something quite interesting. So we need to creatively apply our knowledge. And we need to develop or use tools and resources to create effective, engaging learning. And I think we have to do that collaboratively. We can't do it as individuals. I couldn't do it as an individual. I don't think anyone can. We need to work in groups and share our expertise. And really we need to enhance education at all levels, but also exploit the full opportunity space really created by the new technologies. And I think I finished roughly in time, so I'll stop at that point. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to take them. Okay, thank you.
For the translation.
All right. Okay.
Thank you very much, Professor Boyle. You actually, 10 minutes you took from the time discussion, you know, but we wanted to allow some time for the questions and discussion. But that was very interesting how technology transformed the learning process and transformed it from closed environment to open environment and the pros and cons that comes with it. We'll leave the floor for a discussion and then we'll go to the next speaker, 2 or 3 questions and then we'll go to, please. Do we have a microphone here? Instant translation if you can speak if you want to speak in Arabic or if you want to speak in English.
ممكن يذكر لنا البروفيسور بول تعريف التعلم الالكتروني، مفهوم التعلم الالكتروني. بدنا يعني من خلال باحث هو جاد في هذا المجال ومؤلف، فبدنا نشوف المفهوم من خلال يعني نظرته. أما أن المصطلحات لا تهم كثير ويهم التطبيق. شكرا.
Did you get the question?
No, can you repeat it, please?
Yes, the question is there a specified definition of e-learning or electronic learning, and
Is there a specified definition? I think no, and I don't think we need one. Effectively, most of the work we do is what would be called blended learning. So we work with students face-to-face and we work with them online. But I think the key bit really is that you have some very powerful resources and tools on how to use those effectively. The key challenge ultimately is can we apply really deep pedagogical insights and create learning environments that are exciting and engaging for students. And I think the more the technology can be a barrier. People can be frightened of it. That's why it's good to work collaboratively, because you can work with people who are familiar with it. But what really makes a good e-learning resource or tool is people who can actually, and these are usually educators who come with good design ideas. And if they can work collaboratively with people who have the technical knowledge, I think that's what, that works very effectively.
If I put the question in a different form,
okay.
Is e-learning a substitute for traditional learning or a complement to traditional learning?
Actually, I might be over-pegging it a bit, but I'm actually reminded of this room, because here, looking at the back, it actually sweeps up like a galley. It's a very traditional idea, but actually done in a very modern way. First of all, we aren't actually talking about new technology in learning. We've had technology for a couple of thousand years, and that technology is literature, being literate. That technology changed learning. What we have got are new technologies. And literacy, books, didn't replace face-to-face learning, didn't replace face-to-face teaching. Okay, they complemented it. And I think, again, the technology-enhanced learning will complement it. And whatever particular mix works will depend on the situation you're in. So it's not a question of the new e-learning destroying the old way of doing things. It's finding, I think, the new blend which works most effectively. And not just one blend, there's a whole potential set of answers to that. It can support different languages, but at the moment it doesn't support Arabic because of the right to left issue. But we actually have funding now for another 3 years for a European project. So what we will do is do future releases of it. We actually had an Arabic speaker who was one of the developers on it. And I asked him to check that quite early on. And what happens is the words come in okay, but they come in the wrong order. So that's something that at the moment it will support any, it's basically, for example, it will support Chinese. But it has problems with the right to the left switch between Arabic and English.
Please.
Thank you, sir, for your paper. The fundamental things in learning electronics is the systems and tools. Thank you, sir. I hope to know things about the legal systems of learning electronics, legal systems, about credit rights, persons, teachers, pupils, others, anything about legal systems for the learning electronics. Thank you.
Legal system for what again?
For credit, through information, through information, through information to people, as living to people.
قولها بالعربي أنا أنقلها.
أني ضمانات ممكن يعني الطلبة يحصلون من خلالها على معلومات صحيحة، على معلومات بناءة. هالأمر متعلق يعني بالمصدر المعلومة. كيف يمكن للنظام القانوني أن يضمن صحة المعلومة؟ كيف يمكن للنظام القانوني أن يضمن نجاح العملية التعليمية؟ هل الموضوع متعلق ب يعني رغباتنا أم أنه متعلق بالنتائج؟ النتائج متوقفة على مصدر المعلومة الصحيحة أم أنها متوقفة على الأداة المستخدمة؟ هل لأن الأداة إلكترونية فيجب أن نلجأ إلى أسلوب تعليم إلكتروني، أو أن الموضوع متعلق بمصدر المعلومة؟ مصدر المعلومة تجاري يعني يهمه النتائج التجارية أم النتائج العلمية؟ صلب المشكلة متعلق بعدم الثقة بالتعليم الإلكتروني، لذلك الكثير من الدول لا تعترف بالتعليم عن بعد لأنه يستخدم أساليب إلكترونية محضة. إذا أكو يعني ضمانات قانونية ممكن من خلالها الحصول على أسلوب تعليم إلكتروني بناء يعني مطبق في الدول اللي أو من خلال السيستمز اللي عرضها الأستاذ، إضافة للتولز، يمكن جمع النظامين، يعني استخدام أنظمة قانونية في سبيل ضمان نجاح الأدوات. ثانك يو دكتور عمار المدني من العراق. شكرا.
Thank you.
You get the question?
Yes, I mean, there's quite a lot to the question, which is basically saying, can we have a legal system which will guarantee ultimately the success of the e-learning tools and resources? And I think the short answer is, in a sense, no. One of the big developments in open educational resources was Creative Commons. So these are licenses which are attached to open educational resources, and what they do is guarantee that depends on the license that, for example, you can reuse it and you can adapt it and change it. And that has helped a lot, because otherwise it's quite, unless people are clear about the legal base for reuse. So that has been a big advance. There isn't any legal guarantee that it's going to work. And in a sense, that doesn't operate in the wider environment either. So for example, there's no legal guarantee that the Apple iPhone is going to work. People buy it because it's a very nice piece of design and they're very impressed by it. So ultimately the judgment as to what is working and what isn't, if you take the analogy of research, it's peer review. In research, the people in that area judge what is good research and not. So basically you as teachers are going to have to make the judgment and effectively decide what is effective with your students. And that means all of us need to, in a sense, keep increasing our knowledge and skills, because it's a very fast-moving area. But I don't know of any system where you can legally guarantee that something's going to work.
Professor, what would you say to those countries that he mentioned do not recognize e-learning or gaining a diploma from e-learning, and how do you ensure the quality or the that the learning that the student gets or the diploma that he gets reflect certain skills and certain learning?
I think there's two issues there. One is, I don't think the issue is about e-learning, it's about distance learning. So using e-learning in a blended environment. For example, most universities now have used virtual learning environments, learning management systems. It's just taken as a sort of natural evolution. And more universities are moving towards blended learning. They use face-to-face, but they also use a lot of resources online. The bigger challenge is if you want to put a course totally online. And therefore, people will obviously ask about the quality and how you guarantee it. Can I say that our traditional means of teaching, like lectures, for example, when psychologists investigated lectures as a means of teaching and learning, they found them to be highly flawed. But no one actually goes and says we can't lecture because it's been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. One of the interesting things about e-learning is it makes people think about these issues. It makes them think about the quality of education and how we can guarantee that in a way that is new, because we tended to take for granted our old ways of doing things. And very often they aren't that good. I mean, my son is at one of the top universities in England, and I think the quality of education he's getting is poor. Because most of them are more interested in doing research. A lot of traditional education, a lot of even prestigious universities isn't always that good. It varies very much across. I went to 3 universities and I found brilliant teaching in each of them and hopeless teaching in each of them. So our traditional ways of doing